that song.
ברוכים הבאים לפסטיבל הסרטים הבינלאומי ה-36 של חיפה. אני ירון שמיר, מנהל שותף בפסטיבל. אנחנו מאוד מאוד שמחים לארח כאן את מריאן וסטפן, הבמאים של שירים של דיכוי, Songs of Repression, ואני מיד אעבור לדבר באנגלית כדי לנהל איתם את השיחה. Hello, Marianne and Stefan. Good morning.
Good morning.
Your film is presented in the Haifa Film Festival at a documentary program, and I read in your biographies, and what is published, of course, that the film has a personal touch or touching points to your lives. Both lives. Maybe we can start at this. I mean, this project is not being elected by coincidence by both of you. So maybe you can elaborate on this.
Yeah, sure.
So no one chooses where we get born. And just as the people in the colony didn't choose that, we didn't either. So our backgrounds are both very, very different. But we have some things in similar, and that is that we are both half Chilean. Myself, I am half Chilean, half German. I was born and grew up in Chile in a German minority family. And as many Germans that live in South America, they are very far on the right politically. A family from which for many years now, I've actually distanced myself quite radically, but that's a different story. When I was a child, I grew up in this minority, and Colonia Dignidad was a place that we heard about and that was always referenced as a very positive place. And the colony had a roadside restaurant in the south of Chile, and each time we would travel on the summer holidays, we would time the trip in a way that we would stop at this restaurant to have lunch. And it was this beautiful German lunch, very cozy, very safe. And that was my impression. Now, Marianne has a very different upbringing.
Yeah, I was born and brought up in Denmark with my dad and with my mother, who was a Chilean refugee. She fled Chile in 1973 when Pinochet took over the power in Chile, and we couldn't go back to Chile for many years because it was too dangerous, but we often were in contact with my family who lived in the same region as the colony. They live in a city close by, and they would often mention that that things were happening around that area where the colony was, and that one should never go near that place because political prisoners would disappear in there. That were the few things I heard about the colony, because my mom always said that we shouldn't really talk about that place because it was too terrible than that to give it talking time, you could say.
When we grew up, obviously we learned, both of us, that the world is much more complex than that black and white upbringing we had, and we made our own ideas about the world. And when we met each other in London and lived there for a few years before moving to Copenhagen, we realized that we had these very different views upon the same things. And we started to discuss, well, when you live with an idea that this is the truth or that is the truth, and then you at some point meet a different view, you question yourself. And obviously we found out, and we had already before, but we looked into, well, how does this complex reality look like? Because it's a place where it's not clear cut in this, like, or they're all victims or they're all perpetrators, because most people actually are both in there, and that is very interesting.
I understood that the work on the film has been going to, several years. You've been there on and off meeting with the residents of the colony that has another name now, Villa Bavaria, or
the Bavarian village.
The Bavarian village, yes. And so maybe you can elaborate about the special relationship that was developing between you as the directors and creators, and also people who has a personal a connection to the story, and between the residents, the people who will in Israel that will choose to watch the film will see, I think, and will be amazed of the diversity of opinions and ways to approach the dark past of the place.
Yeah, it took us 4 years in total to make this film, from when we decided to make it till we finished it, and it had premiere in March this year at CPH Docs. And during that time,
where it won the best film prize.
Yeah.
You can say that.
Yes,
and the
film critique prize. That was wonderful. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, a key for us to get close to the inhabitants and to be able to make this film was time. So we went to Chile first on a research trip, where we spoke with the inhabitants in the colony and planted the idea of making a film there. And they were open for that. And then 1 year later, we moved to Chile for almost half a year and took our children with us. We have children together as well. And we didn't live inside the colony, but we lived very close by. So we went there every day to learn, to get to know them and to start filming. And I think they experienced that we had a genuine interest in them. It's not, in Chile and Germany, it's not a place that is unknown. The media has been there very often to make different news pieces and reportages, but it's painted in a very black and white picture. So either they are painted like pure monsters that you shouldn't get close to because they have this horrible history, or they are painted like pure victims of Paul Schaefer. So there is no complexity in these pieces. And what we wanted to do was to open up and giving space for expressing all these nuances that are in there. And we did that by opening up to follow the participants' logic. So we would create a collaboration with them in what would they want to film with us, what would they want to tell us. So you could say that we let them talk from their perspective about their views and about their history. And in that way, we created a possibility for them to express these different ways that they make sense of their past and their present.
And there, of course, you are then confronted with how do humans deal with a past that are marked by 45 years of systematic child abuse, of genders being split up from each other, children being raised in groups without knowing who their parents were, with torturing political prisoners, killing political prisoners and burying them in mass graves on their own ground. And you could go on and on and on. Yeah. So when you have that for 45 years, it's not a year or two, it's 45 years. It leaves these very, very deep sitting traumas. Now, of course, the past is interesting and is part of the film, but what we were especially interested in is the present. How do people deal with that now? I mean, how do you live in a post-totalitarian system where you have to make sense of that past?
It is a very complex film to watch and to feel towards, because it as a viewer, it throws you in different directions and makes you unsure what you exactly feels and what is your stand. And I guess that's what you wanted to create, and I think you succeeded marvelously. I wanted to ask you on the process. I mean, I guess that in 3 years, you had a lot of material. And then you have to take it to the editing room. And the balance, the delicate balance that we are speaking about now, of presenting things in a complex way, is achieved in the editing room. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit about this process of taking all this big material and then try to put this kind of puzzle.
Yes. So we are 2 editors on it. We are 2 directors, but then also I was one of the editors, and the other is Niels Per Andersen, who is a very experienced editor who, among many, many other films, edited the Look of Silence and The Act of Killing, and who is very good at exactly these balances. So that was a very good choice, and I think we made a very good team. Now, we had always in front of our eyes the idea that we need to be able to go back to the residents and show them the film and be able to look them in the eyes. And we did, actually. We did. Just when lockdown was hitting Europe, we kind of flew out, escaping, and went to the colony to show them the film, which was an extremely powerful experience, very cathartic. So that was one of the things that we were always having in mind. I mean, there were lots of ethical questions we were dealing with all the time, because it would be very easy to portray these people as freaks, you could say. I mean, to pull their trousers down and say, ha, 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 you know, and obviously it's not what we were interested in. So it was the balance to say, how do different people inside this small community, which is like a little island, you could say, it could also be a family, it could be a country, but how do they react? How do they live with this past? And creating a narrative structure where, as you said, Yaron, where the audience gets confused, actually, because we are so used to Hollywood, where we know Batman is good, and you know, and who's the good guy, who's the bad guy.
And
life is not
is
like
going
that.
to be punished in the end, and everything will be okay. Yes,
exactly. And you will get out and feel like, yes, the good has prevailed. You know.
But reality is not like that.
No,
and
not at all.
In a way, you could and you could say even in a small family. If it's a family where there has been big traumas, either, what do I know, violence or whatever, you're still dependent on that family, and there's still love as well. So it's all these contradictory feelings that we spoke a lot about in the editing room, and that brought us to a huge amount of work with elaborating each participant in the film as a multi-layered person, you could say. But I would also say that this whole perspective on the participants was brought already into the editing room from our filming and from our point of view from the beginning of the project, because we wanted to make a film with these nuances, but also when we were filming in the colony, we often spoke about, for example, Dora, the woman who works in the garden shop. And we really loved to be with her. And she's a very caring woman, and she could be a very loving aunt of mine. But
what was her reaction, by the way, to the film? Her specific reaction?
She liked it a lot.
Really?
Yes. And you know why? Because something that might be like really, I don't know, shocking or disturbing for us is seen differently depending on the eyes who sees it. And she sees, well, that's me. That person they portray, that is me. Where we think for me, it's really disturbing. And I think for many in the audience, when you first like a person very much, and then after a while, you realize that she tells you, well, actually, Pinochet was such a lovely man. What
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, good, sorry.
But to that, I have to add that in Chile, it's also, it's normal to meet people who thought that Pinochet did a lot of good things for the country. So it's not from an outsider, it can be really shocking, or from a person from the left wing in Chile, but from people from the far right in Chile, it's normal that.
But she's also continue hanging to the myth of colonial dignidad as a paradise. It's not just about Pinochet. It's about Schaeffer as well.
Yes. So that is the way how there's a self-imposed repression where traumas are so strong that you say, we need to stop this. I mean, there's this personal thing that they impose on themselves. And then on top of that, there is a social situation going on where the hierarchy at some point imposed what they called a forgive and forget ceremony.
Yeah.
People were encouraged, but when the hierarchy said that, that was almost as they were forced to never ever to speak about it again. And that, of course, doesn't solve anything, right?
Yeah.
And the traumas stay there.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you something in general, and you can answer or not answer that if you feel uncomfortable with that. There has been, maybe it refers to what you said, Stefan, at the beginning of this talk. There has been a very strong presence of Nazis in South America, specifically in Chile and Argentina.
Yeah. And
they had strong connections with the regimes there.
Yeah.
Why do you think from above, look, I've been in few countries in South America, and usually South American and also Chilean people, I already told you that I've been in Chile twice. In the general culture, in the general mood, if I can think of something completely opposite than the Nazis, I would go to South America. Why? What was the meeting, the connection point between the two? Yeah.
It's a complex story. I'll try to be brief there. So the migration of Germans specifically started much earlier. So the German migration starts in 1880, around there, and then goes on in different waves. So during World War I, there was a big wave of migrations. Then in the world economic crisis in 1929, many poor Germans fled to South America. Then in the 1930s, when the Nazis were taking power in Germany, but before the war, many German Jews left to South America. Then after the war, many German Nazis moved to Chile. And you could go on, because Erich Honecker, the late leader of the GDR, he died in Chile. So there are many waves. And that has to do with some, people hold together in a way. So they go where they already have somebody and connections. And the funny thing, I don't know if you experienced, but in Chile, I see that all the time. All these different, now it's the people who come from those migrants, but German Nazi families, German Jewish families, German just poor people from the countryside migrants, down there, they kind of all melt together. It's like a small minority that sticks together, and it's like, okay, that was the past, and now we have to keep working for each other.
There's also, that's in Chile, the nature, the mountains and lakes, and that also looks a bit like, it's very similar to southern Germany. It's a smaller thing, but it also has to do with that. And most German, the biggest part of the German community in Chile lives in southern Chile, because it looks very much like Chile. And there is another thing. In Chile, the Germans are very, very much looked up to. They are seen as this community that knows how to do things. They do everything correctly and of good quality, and their food.
The same in Israel.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, if you want to buy a good car, buy a German car.
Yes.
It will never break down.
Yeah. It's the same.
The history of Mercedes and Volkswagen, etc. Well, put it aside. Yeah.
Let's not talk about that, right?
Yeah, let's not talk about it. Yeah. That's how it is. I wanted to ask you another question from a little bit a bigger perspective. Based on what you experienced in La Colonia Dignidad and your talks with the people there, how do you think people succumb? I don't know if to say so easily, but what is the attraction of people to in this kind of sects to freely, in a way, at least in the beginning, to give themselves, to allow themselves to be ruled and tortured and abused by a strong individual? Usually it's a man, of course, but there's been also a sects where women were at that point. A strong individual who is in the position of God for them.
I think we as filmmakers, we do not have a clear answer to why they let themselves be subjected to all that, but we've certainly explored it, and we hope that when people have watched the film, they will start thinking and discussing why does the human being let itself be subjected to violence and repression. But I think from what we explored, of course, we learned a lot as well, and it could just as well have been us. I don't think it's an anormal thing for a human being when you grow up inside a totalitarian system, that you do what is asked from you inside that system. Partly because the inhabitants in the film, they didn't learn to be reflective and critical. They didn't learn about other values than what was inside the colony. It was normal everyday life for them. Then you could say there were also adults who moved there, and how come they didn't be more critical? But they were part of this sect, so they were in a way, and also thought that that's why it's not only Schäfer, they also supported his values. And then you can ask yourself, but some people have asked us, but aren't they all just victims to Schäfer because they grew up in this totalitarian system and didn't learn about the outside world? But then we would answer, they were partly victims, but when you come out of this totalitarian system, the colony, as the film also said, the colony opened up when Schäfer passed away. And then we think that there is a big issue on how you take responsibility for what you have done and what has happened to you. And there is a huge lack of work inside the colony, of a lack of work with reconciliation and creating a dialogue to get on, to understand what happened, but also to understand how do we get on in the future without repeating the system that is still in there, because it is still a hierarchical system. And that is what our film really wants to, that we all can discuss about how these totalitarian systems and post-totalitarian societies repeat certain things if there is not created a big and proper dialogue and reconciliation process.
And I think I would add that, I mean, fanatism is a really complex thing, because obviously when you get sucked into it, it's some sort of fanatism. But the one who is fanatic will never say that he's fanatic. He's just a believer, or he's
in the light of the truth, etc.
You know, obviously there are some, I mean, religion and politics are two things that have many things in common and can very easily drift over into fanatism, especially if there is a strong leadership. The thing with the fanatism is that you then start thinking that your view is above somebody else's view. It's not just a different one, but it is
better.
It's better. It's almost holy, right? And then as soon as you get there, then you are almost morally allowed to smash the other because he is less worth than you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Last, I wanted to tell the audience, and I don't know if you know that by coincidence, but sometimes coincidences are not coincidences. In the festival program, we present an animation film called La Casa del Lobo, a wolf house. You know it?
Yes, of course.
I didn't know when I started watching La Casa del Lobo after I saw your film, and I didn't know at the beginning that it refers to the same affair. And it is a wonderful animation. First, an animation film as an animation creation is animation which is very special, but the story of the film is about a young girl that runs away from La Colonia Dignidad and tries to create a safe place for herself in a house. And then she is approached by the big wolf, which is of course someone like Paul Schaefer himself, who tries to destroy it and to take her back or to hurt her. And for the audience in the festival who would like to see how this kind of reality approach after that you took meets with the fantasy, a very creative approach from an animation Chilean creator, it's really nice to watch. I think both works.
Yeah. Wonderful that you have both of them.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, they reflect one on the other, I think.
I think so too. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything else that you want to add before?
We want to say thank you so much for having our film on the festival and for making this interesting Q&A with us. And we would have loved to travel to Israel to watch the film with all of you in a cinema.
Next time we'll be there.
So I want to say thank you very much for allowing us to present your film in the festival. It's an honor. It's an important film. And I really hope that with your next film, after this really not remembered time will pass away, we could have you both in Haifa presenting your new film.
We totally love it.
We'll cross our fingers.
Thank you very much, Yaron. It was a pleasure. And the audience, please enjoy the film.